Good morning, and welcome to all of you joining us here and on YouTube for our first service of 2023, since we didn't hold a service on January 1st. We're especially glad to have those of you who may be with us for the first time and hope to see you again. I'm Jean Wygant, your worship leader today. Before we get into our service, I want to share some news that I think most of you may already know. Our dear friend Katie Tenike died yesterday morning at home with her family. Cynthia Hopkins will share more with us during Joys and Concerns. We open our service today with these words from Sylvia L. Howe. We bid you welcome on this first Sunday of the new year. Like Janus, we gather with part of us looking backward and part of us looking forward. We gather on the edge of the new year, saddened by our losses, cherishing our joys, aware of our failures, mindful of days gone by. We gather on the cusp of this new year, eager to begin anew, hopeful for what lies ahead, promising to make changes, anticipating tomorrows and tomorrows. We invite you to join in our celebration of life, knowing that life includes good and bad, endings and beginnings. We bid you welcome. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. Our chalice lighter and our speaker today is Seth Moran. Seth is a volcanologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, a member of the UU Church in Vancouver, and on the board of Elliott Institute. He will be available for coffee and conversation following the service. Seth, we welcome you back for your second time with us. His presentation today explores some of the ways in which mindfully combining scientific inquiry with spiritual practice can help us make the world a better place. Let's all take a moment right now to greet each other. And first, we in the chapel, let's stand, turn, and look at the cameras that are up there by the clock on the back wall, and wave hello to our friends who are viewing the service on YouTube. And greet each other.
It's our birthday today. Happy birthday to you.
Please be seated. We wish to acknowledge that for at least 13,000 years, many tribes and bands have made their lives here, where our church home and our communities now exist. We remember and honor these people who have made their homes in this land, the ones here now and the ones who used to be here. We gather remembering this is our home, but not just ours. In peace, may we share this land and honor one another. A quick heads up to those of you attending online. If you would like to share a joy or concern later in the service, please write it in the chat so that our staff can bring your words up to us at that time. Thank you. Our opening hymn today is Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. It's number 361 in the gray hymnal, and the words are on the screen also. In light of the news about Katie, you may not feel particularly joyful, but remember, you can be sad and joyful at the same time. So let's stand and sing with joy.
The story today is a modification on a story written by Greta Anderson titled Rachel Carson Shapes Tomorrow. Better living through chemistry. This was the motto of America's leading corporations in the 1950s. Chemicals could make better clothing. Chemicals could improve food. Chemicals could increase farm yields and improve our environment. Magazine and television ads and billboards shouted the message to the public. Better living through chemistry was the American way. Marine biologist Rachel Carson disagreed, but she was used to going against the tide. Starting out in the 1920s, she was a rarity in the largely male science profession. Yet she moved up in her chosen field, working as an aquatic biologist at Woods Hole in Cape Cod and then in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Carson was both a marine biologist and a writer. As much as she was fascinated by the creatures of the ocean and their intricate, interconnected web, she loved to share her fascination with the public. And the public loved her books. Rachel Carson took readers on a journey from the teeming abundance of the tide pool to the dark, mysterious ocean depths. Life was everywhere. Life was diverse. Life was a celebration. So imagine how Rachel felt when, in the 1950s, the US government began dropping bombs on tiny enemies within our own borders, insects such as fire ants and mosquitoes. Throughout the 1950s, airplanes sprayed chemicals like DDT over America's farmlands, suburbs, and towns in an attempt to eliminate insects. The government supported it. No one stopped to question it. Though her own health was weak, Rachel commenced the fight of her life. The book she published as Silent Spring argued that spraying chemicals like DDT was not giving us a better life, but actually endangered life. Rachel included information from hundreds of scientific studies explained in language that the public could understand. She took care to avoid errors or exaggerating because she knew she must be ready to back up every statement or the chemical companies could discredit her whole work. Silent Spring leaped onto the bestseller lists. Yes, government and industry spokespeople tried to discredit Rachel for being sentimental or hysterical, for being a back-to-nature type, and probably a communist. But the many people who saw her on television saw a frail, clear-eyed woman with a detailed, objective truth to tell. On the other hand, the government officials responsible for the spraying had very few facts to prove DDT was safe. The public sensed that Rachel was right. The debate about pesticides use sparked by Silent Spring gave momentum to the 1960s environmental movement. In 1970, the government formed the Environmental Protection Agency. In 1972, the government banned the use of DDT in the United States. The same year, Earth Day was proclaimed. Rachel Carson died shortly after the publication of Silent Spring, and one can say it's a shame she could not witness the growth of the environmental movement she did so much to create. But for Rachel, life was not about the individual. It was about diverse communities of beings that continuously recycle and renew life. In this sense, Rachel's courage, her vision of life, and her fierce argument against pesticides have become part of all of us. And so ends the story.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit. And don't be reaching for your wallets, there'll be time. To grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take up an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support this self-supporting church and its ministries. If you are here for the first time, we invite you to truly be our guests and let the basket pass. Here at Eastrose, we share half our offering with a community nonprofit that we support. This month, we're sharing with Snowcap Community Charities. Snowcap provides food, clothing, advocacy, and other services to our neighbors in need. If you are attending online, you may donate by visiting our website and clicking the Donate button, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully received. please remain seated and join one another in singing Spirit of Life. It's hymn number 123 in the gray hymnal, and the words are on the screen. I want to read to you an excerpt from the piece called A Pale Blue Dot. It's by Carl Sagan. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic area. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale blue light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic darkness. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, Carl Sagan, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Thank you, Jean. That reading just encapsulates everything about what I'm about to talk about. And there are many profound scientists that are out there, and Carl Sagan is one that was very much a member of that club. As Jean mentioned, I'm a volcanologist, and I'm also a member of UU Church in Vancouver. And it's my experience in both of those communities that there's not a lot of overlap in terms of scientists who are religious or spiritual religious folks who are scientists. And I've struggled with that throughout my entire life. Starting with when I was 8 years old, 47 years ago, on the evening of July 7th, 1975, to be precise. That was the day when I suddenly became aware that someday I would no longer exist. On that evening, I'd heard on a sports radio show that a horse called Ruffian had broken her foreleg during a race and had to be euthanized. For reasons that I cannot remember now, I'd developed a sentimental attachment to Ruffian, and the news of her death resonated in my mind for several sleepless hours, eventually building into a major panic attack as I came to realize that I, like Ruffian, would also one day no longer exist. My first ever existential crisis eventually had me crying so hysterically that my mother and sister still remember that night. I'd never been religious before that, but boy, did I get religion afterwards. I desperately needed to know that I would continue to exist and that there would be an afterlife. And in the Episcopal Church, to which I dragged my father every Sunday morning, I found the story I needed. If I lived a good life, heaven would be waiting. If not, well, then there was that other place, but at least that was better than no longer existing. At the same time, I was also developing a fascination with the natural world. In 1973, I was spellbound by an eruption in Iceland. Spectacular photographs of the eruption appeared in the New York Times and National Geographic, because back then there was no internet. That was the only way, which I dutifully cut out and pasted into a scrapbook. A year later, my parents took me and my sister to visit that volcano, which still had steaming, stinky lava that was warm to the touch. My imagination captured, I started checking and rechecking out books about volcanoes from our local library, reading and rereading stories of the eruptions of Vesuvius, Krakatoa, and Paricutin. In 4th grade, I told my teacher that I wanted to be one of two things when I grew up: a volcanologist or a Bee Gee. Because disco, that was what was going on. When I moved on to middle school, I was more than ready to start taking actual science classes. And in these classes, I was exposed for the first time to the scientific method and the scientific understanding that underlay things like genetics, weather prediction, and acid rain. The more I learned, the more I started questioning the stories I had been hearing in church. From a pure logic perspective, it became pretty difficult to believe that Jesus, all by his lonesome, could act on the prayers of hundreds of millions of Christians around the world. Other unverifiable parts of the Christian faith also started bothering me, and it became increasingly difficult to sit every Sunday morning through sermons that mainly cited Scripture as supporting evidence for why things are the way they are. Finally, right around the time Mount St. Helens erupted, I stopped going to church. At that point, I shared much in common with scientist Stephen Hawking, who once said, "There is a fundamental difference between religion, which is based on authority, and science, which is based on observation and reason. Science will win because it works." I did not return to organized religion again until my wife Elisa and I joined the Uyghur Church of Vancouver in 2004. It's about 25 years. Today I come to you as a spiritual scientist, a person who is actively working to reconcile his spiritual and scientific sides. Although I gave up on organized religion for a big chunk of my life and pursued science in the form of a PhD and an ongoing career as a government scientist working on volcanoes, I've also found that science has its limits. I believe there will always be unanswerable questions like, what does it mean to live a good life? Why am I here? What happens when I die? Science can only go so far with questions like these. Something else is needed to help make sense of them. As Albert Einstein once said, everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe. That conviction, in a nutshell, is why I've returned to organized religion. Einstein's quote highlights an important relationship between science and spirituality, namely that they are two sides of the same coin, the yin to each other's yang. Asking the "I wonder why" question is the start of the journey for both science and spiritual people. And one could argue that between science and spirituality, the entire spectrum of possible answers is covered. Science is about that which is knowable. Spirituality is arguably about that which is unknowable. The mystery. In my view, it is entirely compatible to say, I believe in science and I believe in the great mystery. There is, of course, more to science and spirituality than being two sides of a coin. Turning again to Albert Einstein, he once succinctly cast things along the following lines. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. In my humble opinion, spirituality is about more than just religion, so I will take the liberty of recasting Einstein's quote as science without spirituality is lame, and spirituality without science is blind. I hope that Einstein, wherever he is, will forgive me for that. Specifically, science and spirituality bring to the table perspectives, practices, and understandings that enrich the other. This mutual enrichment is baked into our UU faith through, among other things, our children's affirmation. Would you all that are familiar with that, would you mind saying along with me? Here goes. Love your neighbor as yourself. Search for truth with an open mind. Make the world a better place. That's how my church sends the children out in the middle of the service. And that first line, love your neighbor as yourself, that comes from a spiritual place with roots going back to Jesus. It certainly isn't based on the results of years of careful scientific analysis performed by independent research groups, all reaching the same conclusion that 9 out of 10 people who love their neighbors as themselves live an average of 8.413 years longer. Although it wouldn't surprise me if that were true. Rather, love your neighbor is a belief-based statement that gives us a moral compass for how to behave in the world. On the other hand, there is no better way to describe the ideal of scientific process than the second line of the children's affirmation, search for truth with an open mind. If you can approach scientific inquiry with an open mind, removing any biases or ego or attachment to your own conclusions, honestly listening to the data, even if it tells you that your hypothesis is wrong and your arch rival's hypothesis is right, which means that she will get the big grants and you won't. If you can do that, you will get to the truth much faster. Speaking from experience, it's really hard to be open to other scientists being right and you being wrong, which is where loving your neighbor as yourself becomes important in science. If you can do that, you can search for truth with an open mind. And therein lies one example of how science and spirituality can enrich each other. Some other examples, going back to my recasting of Einstein's quote, starting first with science without spirituality is lame. What does spirituality bring to science that the scientific world is missing? Well, for one thing, science as a discipline aspires to be objective. A scientific purist would say that, above all else, the goal should be to let the data speak for itself. The only way that can happen is for scientists to be objective. This means evaluating the merits of a scientific study based only on things like the quality of the data, the methodologies used to analyze the data, and the reasoning behind the conclusions. It is irrelevant whether the study itself is morally good or bad. And herein lies a fundamental issue for science. As the Dalai Lama once said, unless the direction of science is guided by consciously ethical motivations, especially compassion, its effects may fail to bring benefit. They may indeed cause great harm. So Rachel Carson gave us one example of that with DDT. Long list of examples of science causing harm. Take, for example, the field of weapons engineering. From the invention of grape shot to poison gas to neutron bombs, there have been millions of technological and scientific advancements over the centuries that have made it progressively easier to hurt, terrorize, and kill people. Alfred Nobel was a practitioner of this type of science. He is famously known as the inventor of dynamite and was the owner of over 100 factories that manufactured explosives used for both industry and militaristic purposes. How did he get there? From there to the Nobel Peace Prize. The story goes that one day, a French newspaper mistook the news of the death of his brother, Ludwig Nobel, for that of Alfred's death, which led that paper to write a scathing obituary with the headline, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." Alfred, who was in fact still alive, read that obituary, and that experience convinced him to funnel the hundreds of millions of dollars in profit he had received from his inventions and factories into the Nobel Awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize, which has brought to light the work of people like Sister Teresa, Rigoberta Menchú, and the Reverend Desmond Tutu. Too bad Nobel had to earn the title Merchant of Death to get there. Products of science have also made it far easier to damage or destroy the fragile ecosystems that reside on this pale blue dot of ours, and on which the survival of us, our species, and many others are critically dependent upon. The use of DDT as an insecticide was a growing environmental disaster in the 50s and 60s that was arrested in part because of the efforts of Rachel Carson. In her book, Silent Spring, Carson called out all scientists when she wrote, "If we are going to live so intimately with these chemicals, eating and drinking them, taking them into the very marrow of our bones, we had better know something about their nature and their power." The idea that DDT was unleashed without first having a true scientific understanding of its nature and its power should give everyone pause. And incidentally, the same thing has been happening now for several decades with plastic. For scientists, the story of Alfred Nobel and Rachel Carson underline how critical it is that we proceed with an eye not just to the purity of our scientific practices, but also to an understanding of the impacts of our work on the world. The question we should have uppermost in our mind is, are we, in fact, working to make the world a better place? Okay, so turning to spirituality next. How is it that spirituality without science is blind? Well, for one thing, our lives have been made better by science. For example, we're living a lot longer now than we were 100 years ago, courtesy of scientists like Dorothy Horseman, who in the 1940s proved that the polio virus reaches the brain through the blood, a discovery that led directly to Jonas Salk's development of the polio vaccine. Thanks to this vaccine, polio has been almost entirely eradicated since the 50s. For another, we know a lot more about how things work than we used to. To quote Stevie Wonder, "When you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way." Take earthquakes, for example. As recently as the 1900s, humans had no real basis for understanding why earthquakes happened. To fill the void, we created stories. The Greeks put the blame on the god Poseidon, believing that when an earthquake happened, it was because Poseidon had been offended or ignored. Appeasement of Poseidon took many forms, including ritual sacrifice of horses. These days, courtesy of a lot of scientific study, we understand that earthquakes happen for reasons having everything to do with fault mechanics and stresses associated with plate tectonics, and nothing to do with our relationship to a god. Furthermore, we understand that the hazard isn't equal everywhere. If you want to live your life without the worry of experiencing the big one, you can live in Ohio, Massachusetts, or Florida, which is a lot better than sacrificing horses. But it's still great to live here. Scientific discoveries also give rise to wonder. In his pale blue dot, Carl Sagan beautifully captures the wonder of looking at planet Earth from millions of miles away, courtesy of the scientific achievement of space travel. I'm still marveling at the recent discovery, courtesy of functional MRIs, that music lights up the brain like no other activity we humans engage in, perhaps explaining why music can at least temporarily bring people back who are suffering from dementia. And I wonder, why is it that music has that effect on our brains? And deeper into the mystery I go. The scientific method, outside of making our lives better, or reducing our fear of the unknown, or giving us new discoveries to marvel at, a key way that science can enrich spiritually, enrich us spiritually, is through the scientific method that underlies all scientific endeavors. The scientific method involves 3 steps, which include observing, questioning, hypothesizing, and then there's also testing and analyzing that are part of that. Done correctly, with objectivity, with rigor, and with an open mind, this fairly simple process has been shown time and again to have the power to unearth previously unimaginable truths. And the craziest thing is that many of us spiritual people use the scientific method daily in our lives. We're just not aware of it. One key tenet of the scientific method is that any result must be repeatable. If the results of an investigation can't be repeated, then the results can't be believed. Belief in the scientific world is based on repeatability, which means that science is often a slow process, with scientists religiously engaging in what the Dalai Lama describes as healthy skepticism, until a particular result has been achieved multiple times in independent tests. Healthy skepticism, when you think about it, is a good philosophy for all of us to follow most of the time. It's a great thing to keep in mind when poking around on the internet, for example. Good rule of thumb, if you read it once, be a little skeptical. If you read it multiple times, multiple places, independent sources, maybe you're onto something you can believe. As far as how we use the scientific method in our everyday lives, I'll illustrate that with a personal example. A number of years ago, I had a blood test that showed I had elevated blood sugar levels that were on the edge of being pre-diabetic. This flummoxed me as I don't have a family history and think of myself as being decently healthy. When I brought this result to our family naturopath, she hypothesized that it had something to do with my diet. As a first step, she had me do a food allergy test. Since I'd never had any obvious signs of food allergies in my life, I was skeptical. Very healthy skepticism. I was even more skeptical when the results came back strongly positive for eggs, gluten, and milk. For someone who grew up almost exclusively on bread and cheese and who loved nothing more than a nice egg and bagel sandwich for breakfast, these results were, pardon the pun, hard to swallow. Undeterred, my naturopath hypothesized that although I'd not been obviously symptomatic, perhaps my elevated blood sugar levels were a sign that my body wasn't happy with all the gluten, eggs, and dairy I'd been eating. The next step, test her hypothesis with an elimination diet. After eliminating gluten, eggs, and milk for 6 weeks, the test was then to bring them back one at a time for a day, observe the body's reaction, then go back on the diet. The first time I brought back eggs, oh my goodness, they tasted good. Oh. How could I possibly be allergic to something that tasted so good? But towards the end of the day, after a couple of hours of denial, I finally had to admit that I was having some intestinal discomfort, and I didn't sleep well that night. Proof positive that eggs were bad for me? Nope. That was only one data point. Those symptoms could just as easily have been caused by a cold. Science, belief happens only after repetition, so I repeated the test, off eggs for a week, then on for a day, and observed with as much detachment as possible, even though I love eggs. And sure enough, each time I brought eggs back, problems kicked in a few hours later. Through this scientific process, I really reluctantly came to the conclusion that my naturopath was right. Diet was the issue, and I needed to avoid eating eggs and gluten too, unfortunately. And lo and behold, the next time I had my blood sugar levels taken, they were down. What a nice little miracle that was, courtesy of science. And what a wonder, these human bodies of ours. Perhaps you've noticed that the elements of the scientific method as I have described them share many similarities with the spiritual practices you use and engage in every day as part of our faith. Observing, being in the moment, noticing the world, questioning, wonder, hypothesizing, testing, analyzing, searching for truth with an open mind. If we are able to carry out these scientific practices to the best of our abilities, without ego and with an open mind, and marry them to the spiritual tenets of our UU religion, tenets like love your neighbor as yourself, then I believe that we can't help but make the world a better place.
Let's take a moment of silence to individually reflect on what we've just heard.
I have a question.
Please stand and join together in our closing hymn, Blue Boat Home. The words are on the screen and on page 1064 in the teal hymnal. Extinguish our chalice with the words of Amy Zucker Morganson. Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the spark within us remains alight. From each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparkling through space to one another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one, and from every window our light shines.
And so, my friends, as you go out into the world, lean over the edge in wonder. Cast your questions into the deep. Search for truth with an open mind while holding in your heart your fellow kindred pilgrim souls. And in so doing, you will make the world a better place. May it be so.
and yet majestic. This concludes today's service, but please stay seated for the following announcements. And first of all, does anybody have an announcement here that we, yes, Keen.
I'll just make it quick. We have set the next outreach meeting for the 17th of January, and it will be here at the church. Anybody that wishes to come and participate and help set an agenda for the coming year is fully welcome. We'll put it in the pedals here shortly, but just anybody that wants to participate in that is more than welcome. It'll be here at 3:30 in the afternoon. Or maybe 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock.
Okay, 3 o'clock. And Keen is the chair of the outreach committee, so if you have other questions, you may ask him, talk to him after. Yes, Lynn?
Books are out in the lobby. Remember, we weren't able to get them on Christmas Eve in our book flood. Who can pronounce the Icelandic word?
Jólaflug.
Yay! There's also chocolate, which I guess we will enjoy now as well as on Christmas Eve. So please look over the books and take some home.
I brought some antique books, really old ones. They look beat up, but hey, they're priceless.
Wonderful. So this is, I think Lynn just said, this is an Icelandic tradition. And I was reading something about it. The booksellers put out a list before Christmas of all the new books of that year. People buy books and give them to each other for Christmas, and then oftentimes sit down together and just read their books right after that. Doesn't that sound like a nice way to spend a peaceful, quiet Christmas?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other announcements from the floor? Okay, then Cynthia has an announcement, and so I invite you up. Why don't you come to the podium?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. For those of you who don't know, I'm president of the Board of Trustees for Eastrose. And this has been a real roller coaster emotional week for me with Katie and this news I'm about to deliver. Pending the approval of the membership, Eastrose will have a new minister as of August 1st, 2023. Yes. This is something we were going to turn our attention to, the search, in January, but I know, happy birthday.
Thank you.
But yes, well, let me finish with my good news and then we'll celebrate, okay? All right, so Reverend Robin Zucker, some of you have heard her preach at Eastrose in the past. It was several years ago now that she had come and visited. She's ending her term as an interim minister in Flagstaff, Arizona at the end of June. And she is moving to the Portland area to be near her daughter and new grandchild. And she wants Eastrose to be her new ministerial home. So she clicked the right box on the UUA website, and I got notification that we had a candidate that was interested in us. So it is rare that you get the candidate in your vicinity and can meet with them face-to-face during this process. Frequently, it's done across state lines, on the internet. So she was here, so we arranged to visit with her this past Monday. Here in the chapel, face-to-face, I had three of the members from the Ministerial Search Committee last year, Tara Toller, Katie Norris, and Char Woods, met with me and Reverend Zucker. We briefed her very candidly on Eastrose issues. She was very candid with us about her intentions and her desires and her skills. And there's only two of us here in person today, Katie Norris and me, and she's just grinning at me because it was such a wonderful meeting, and we were like floating on air as we left. We feel like she is the perfect answer for us going forward. I convened the board on Wednesday, and after some discussion, all 7 members of the board unanimously approved offering Robin Zucker a contract for 3-quarter-time ministry. On January 29th, we will show one of Reverend Zucker's recorded services that she has given in Flagstaff. We are not going to be able to get her to preach live for us anytime soon, and this is all very time sensitive. So immediately following that service on January 29th, we will have a congregational meeting and a vote. Those of you who are members who will receive a very detailed letter with links to Robin Zucker's website. She has a YouTube channel, and also will share a really glowing letter of recommendation from one of her constituents out there in Flagstaff. So look for that. Those of you who are not members and want to, because only members can vote, those of you who are not members but are friends or visitors or who are interested, we will be putting some of this information in pedals soon, but we wanted to make this announcement in person today. So, as I said, those of us who met her in person are very impressed with her. We feel she's a perfect fit. And I want to add that nearly all of the small congregations in the Portland area are now lay-led. And there are not enough ministers to go around to fill these openings. We're just incredibly fortunate this has come our way. Really, really fortunate. So I'll be around for a while after service. Katie will too if you want to chat with us briefly, but there will be more information on this coming out very soon, very soon. And please mark January 29th on your calendar to come and hear the service. And also, it'll be broadcast online. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah. Well, let's do it.
Good job.
So, not much can follow that announcement. So this is the end. I would like to invite the people online to exit YouTube and join the cafe conversation on Zoom with the link that's provided. Those in the chapel, I don't see any coffee out there, so I'm guessing, what?
I will be bringing coffee in a minute.
Oh, bless your heart. I thought maybe the machine was still dead. Coffee conversation, peruse the books and the chocolates outside, talk with Seth, and talk with each other. You're excused.